What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Proteus Performance Podcast. I am your host, Will Waterman, Head of Human Performance and Sports Science at Proteus Motion. This is the podcast where we feature our customers, their businesses, who they train, and how they train them. And we have a nerdy deep dive treat for you today. Our guest today is Jarrett Phillips. Jarrett Phillips is a golf and rotational athlete guru. Let's just say it how it is. He's a guru, and he owns TrainPMT in Southlake, Texas. It's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's a 7,500 square foot facility, and it's designed to train golfers and other rotational athletes. He uses all kinds of awesome screening techniques, including Proteus, that he does a little bit of a deep dive in for you. He really gives you a lot of kind of a look behind the curtain, so to speak, on his techniques, how he's training people, what type of exercises he has people doing, what other, technologies pair well with Proteus and pair well with other, what other types of equipment. And he also really dives into some things I think are super fascinating to kind of consider, from a golf mechanics and swing mechanics standpoint. What are the weak links? What are the most common things that you see wrong? And he's really looking at it from a data perspective. I mean, he measures everything, he tests everything, he retests, he challenges himself to make his clients better, because he just looks at those numbers to see if things are getting improved. He looks at, their actual swing speeds. He looks at obviously Proteus metrics and a bunch of other metrics to see how things are performing. And when his program isn't working, he changes things. So anyways, just a little bit more background on Jarrett. He has basically been, he's taken every certification you can imagine from TPI. He's level 3 golf fitness certified. He's probably dove into golf, nerddom as far as how to make people better at swing speed more than anyone that I've ever spoken to. He has 18 plus years of training experience, 16 plus continuing education certifications, he trains over 750 athletes, or has trained over 750 athletes. And he's done over 2,000 movement screens. So as you'll see as you'll hear in the interview, not only does he do screens for people at his facility, but he also does screenings for people outside his facility that come to him, pay for assessments from him, then he sends them off with their data and their results. And sometimes he'll even write those programs for them, remotely. So he has athletes at over 61 colleges, and he, has one of the more advanced ways I've ever seen to integrate all these technologies into kind of one, overall arching umbrella of a system. So anyways, I think I'm going to do a disservice continuing to talk. This is a longer episode. We get really, really nerdy and deep. And so if you're, especially someone that works with golf athletes or any rotational athlete, get your notepads out, because this one's full of some really awesome tidbits and things that you can take back to work with your clients tomorrow. So hope you guys enjoy. Jarrett Phillips. Okay, Jarrett Phillips, long time coming. I've been super excited to have you on. Welcome to the Proteus Performance Podcast. Thanks for coming on. You're going to be our first guest to really dive deep into golf. I've been so excited about this. Welcome to the show.
Hey, well, I appreciate it, man. This has been a long time coming. Over 2 years of data collection now. This is going to be exciting to dive into.
Oh man, you and I have had so many conversations over these last couple of years where, I get a text from you, hey man, I think I'm discovered something really awesome, I go, well, what is it? Text back. And then we get on a phone call and we end up talking for an hour. And I kind of, what I'm hoping from this episode is that, the listeners and all potential customers and everything get a chance to hear some of this stuff that we talk about, because it's so freaking cool. So everyone prepare to get a little nerdy, but let's start with this. Let's talk about your background a little bit. Tell us how you got into golf performance.
Okay. Well, so I was growing up, my goal was to be a Division I college football player. And I came just short of that, ended up in Division II as a two-sport athlete, and did my internship at Southern Methodist University, where I kind of really got excited about strength conditioning, having had an athletic career and then transitioning into that. But I didn't want to move. And I realized that to work your way up the totem pole, you may have to live all over the country. And I really like Dallas-Fort Worth. So I was like, I'm going to transition more into the private sector. And, went and did the personal training thing and did not like doing weight loss, did not like that whole scene. And so I kind of branched out on my own and was doing mobile training when one of my clients was an avid golfer. This is back in I don't know, 04, 05, somewhere. And one day he comes in and he says, hey, my golf pro says my workouts are hurting my golf swing. And I was like, what in the world is this? And I'd heard about this thing called TPI, but I hadn't really dove into it yet. So I meet with the pro and I meet with him, and this pro just schools me. Like, have you screened him? Like, are you stacking fitness on top of dysfunction? Like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And he really just schooled me and like, wait a minute, who's the certified strength coach here? And so I realized that there was something there. And my client literally said, hey, if you don't go and do that certification, I'm probably gonna have to look for another trainer. And at that point in time, he was a client on a retainer fee, $1,500 a month, and so I was like, man, that's going to be a big income drop. So I called my buddy that I knew was on the TPI advisory board, Dr. Mark Smith. And I said, hey, you've got to get me into the Austin class, because this whole screening thing is going to cost me a client. So I go down, and Greg Rose and TPI do a great job. And he blew my mind with the whole test, then train, then reevaluate. So I said, this whole test, train, reevaluate, I loved, and I dove right in. And I ended up going through all three levels of their certifications for golf performance. So level 1, level 2, level 3. And then I was so enamored with this whole screening thing that I looked at their advisory board and said, well, who's coming up with all this? And I bought all their books and went to all their courses. So Greg Cook and all of those guys with FMS and PRI and I don't even know who else, ended up doing the FRC stuff. So like I ran the
game.
gamut.
Dove in head first. You're just
and I probably spent 10 grand on books and certifications over the course of a couple of years. So that's where it started. Went to a golf academy, became director of fitness there here in Southlake, did that for 8 years, and realized that I didn't just want to do golf. I want to do all rotary sports. And as I looked, I was like, we are doing so much of the sports instructions with youth all wrong. It's like all skill, spend all my money and all my time working on skill, when it's like, hey, what your body can do has a massive influence on how well you can adapt skill. I think this paradigm's a little wrong. And I think Greg Rose agrees with a lot of that as well. And so that's where this whole idea for TrainPMT came. I wanted to do a college style program. So, you got maybe 2 or 3 guys to a rack and everybody's on programs. What I decided to do was, let's develop it in pods to where each athlete has all their own equipment. I can run a custom plan, and I'll use technology and screenings where I can customize it, but yet run it in small groups. So 1 coach per 4 to 6 athletes. So that's what we do. And that's where this whole kind of golf performance thing started. But the swing speed is what really intrigued me.
And you mean just increasing club head speed?
Yeah. So coming from a football and track background, it's like every athlete is after more speed.
Right.
I mean, like, yes, can we get faster? And golf was weird. Half the people, I want more speed. The other half were scared of it. They thought it was going to inhibit their performance or get them hurt or something like that.
Right.
And so part of what I want to do is I really want to help revolutionize golf training, get it away from general fitness stuff, body sculpting, too much powerlifting, and then too gimmicky, like, doing speed sticks and not building an engine. So that's where you guys really helped me go to another level.
Yeah, well, hey, first, appreciate it. But I think that's a really interesting thing to touch on a little bit. So you talk about how, some people weren't into the, chasing higher club head speeds and some are, but I think all the the statistics, right? It's kind of like the three ball in basketball, right? Like a 3-point shot, like it's totally changed the game. Now everyone realizes to have a big drive drastically improves the rest of your game, right? Like that's kind of where the stats are going, correct?
Absolutely. You can, if you search and really dive into the stats on that, what you'll find is the proximity to the hole, which is what all golfer wants. I want to hit the green and be as close to the hole as possible so that I can make a putt. Now, yes, you have to be able to putt. You have to be able to have all these things. But ultimately, the closer your approach shot is, the closer your proximity to hole is. So Mark Brody's championed the strokes gained concept, and you see it all over the tour, and it's evident. If you the further your drive is, now obviously you can't be out of bounds and losing balls in bad positions, but let's touch on that a little later, because there's a big misconception that when you swing faster, you're going to miss farther.
Oh yeah, totally. So I mean, well, it's one of those things, I know that it's something you guys focus on, because when I first walked into your facility the first time after you got Proteus, you have that board.
Oh, the board.
Yeah. Yes. And it was like, you have everything in miles per hour and all that. And it was the first time, I'm not, let's make sure all the listeners know, I am not a golf guy. The golf guy you want to listen to is Jarrett, but it was something I walked into this. I've been to a few golf, training facilities before, and to see all that up there like that and the way that you organize it, I was like, oh, this is something different, right? Like you're going after something different than I think some of these other places or some of the other facilities I've seen go after. And to really have a place that's, I think, emphasizing those particular metrics and is really cool. And the way that after talking to you, the way that you've broken that down into component parts, and trying to find all these different areas where people are leaking power is super, super interesting. And that's what I really want to dive into.
Okay.
But yeah, so let's back up a little bit though. How did you first find out about us? I think I remember our first phone call pretty well. It was something like a Zoom call or something like that. But how did you first hear about Proteus?
Well, I'm not a big go to seminars guy. What I'd rather do is constantly be reading, listening to podcasts. I love that podcasts and social media really allow you to connect with other professionals, even guys you may not know, and use that as a filter and a sounding board to consider new ideas and to consider things. And so I had already, realized in my own playing golf and trying to, first off, I'd never liked to play golf because it's like all this, slow, controlled, boring. I'm a power guy. I played football, ran track. I wanted to go fast. So when I finally realized that you could drive for show and putt for dough, I really kind of love this idea of doing long drive or something. So I got into it myself. And as I was doing it and breaking the golf swing down like you would, how to do a power clean or all these other sports moves, it was this swing and this move has such a unique transfer of force that I wish I had a way to load my golf swing perpendicular to line of force, three-dimensionally all the way through the swing. I said, if I could come up with that, I could simplify golf training, and it could improve golf training and, kind of work and all that. And the first time I got an idea, I was using a free motion fitness machine. It was their live axis, which means the pulley where the cable is moves. So the line of force changes, and they used it for bicep and tricep stuff. So as you did your bicep curls, the connection would move, creating that perpendicular line on the muscle tissue. So I grabbed it and started pulling it horizontally like a golf swing. And I realized if I got my angle just right, it would mimic the chop pattern early, and then the angle would change more horizontal, and then it would get more up. And so I started using that and realized the lead side lat oblique system is so important for golfers. I went, and then I immediately saw a change in my swing. And mainly because as a linear athlete, I rarely challenged rotation growing up. And rarely, you still rotate in football, but we never trained that way. Everything was barbell based. We never really put horizontal force angles and really developed the ability to rotate. I was a really bad rotator. So as I looked at that, I was like, man, I got to recreate this. I talked to free motion engineers, And I said, hey, is there a way to make this? Can we move the connection down here? Can we put more on here to make this thing all the way through? That was literally about 4 months before I heard Eric Cressy's podcast, where he may have even done a blog post that mentioned it. And I said, what is that? What is that thing? Then I tried to find some videos, or maybe he did the podcast then. And I said, I got to talk to those guys because I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. And it was three-dimensional resistance, and so it was, you guys didn't even have to sell me. I just had to know that it actually did it. And I remember I was going to drive down to Waco or something because there was a unit down there. And I said, you know what, let's just go ahead and move forward. And the first day I got it and did it, it was evident. It was exactly that piece that I was looking for. I wasn't even thinking the testing part.
Interesting. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So you were way more interested just on the 3D resistance training aspect.
Absolutely. I said, man, now I can load the body in these weirdly unique ways that happen. Because look, I had already worked with, that golf academy, probably 500 golfers. We did all the TPI power testing, where we did the sit up and throw a med ball, the push, the vertical jump, and the shot put.
What you're describing there, by the way, for folks that don't know, that's the TPI power element, right? That's how they assess power, right?
Right. So that because Greg Rose made a great comment in one of the classes, if I get your power test, I usually can predict your swing speed within 2 to 3 miles an hour. And so I tried to do that and replicate it. And it's extremely correlative. I would say it's correlative. Mm-hmm. The Proteus data is predictive. And that's what I've been telling people lately. There's correlative data and there's predictive. I can sit in here with a golf client that comes in and assess their so on our site, we talk about flexibility and stability because the consumer world doesn't understand all this joint mobility and patterns and all this stuff. So if you have flexibility and you have mobility, your power profile is going to tell us how you swing the club.
So it's kind of like you have to have that flexibility, mobility as just your base, right? Then power is like the next layer on the pyramid, right? Which
to simplify it. I mean, obviously we can get into some real like you can get guys that are way smarter than me, start breaking down that statement and go, oh, no, there's a lot of layers. Yes, there's multiple things and they all intermix into a web. But if we simplify this thing a little bit, and that was the other thing, I don't want to make this complicated. Mm-hmm. How can we make this simple? Quit trying to overcomplicate it. And we need double blind studies on everything. No, I can take 500 data sets and show you that there is an absolute predictive element of this. And if you just chase those things, golfers get better on a large scale, really easy in 8 to 12 weeks. Why do we have to make it complicated?
Right. Well, let's talk about, I love it, man. So let's talk about your testing, battery, what you put the clients through. So, you're, instead of doing those, and if I'm not mistaken, instead of doing those TPI things, you started shifting more towards doing those same tests, but on Proteus and on, maybe some other devices as well. Can you maybe just lay out what a typical assessment looks like for a first-time client?
Absolutely. So we start with a muscle scan on an in-body bioimpedance machine. It's a segmental scanner. It's medical grade. It's really accurate. Yeah, there's a little, with water fluid stuff, but it tracks all that. So what we do is we look at their total muscle, which is, how do they compare to their height, age, and gender? Okay, because we know if we're going to play a sport and do something, we can't have less tissue than the average person. So we look at that. And then what that machine also does is it segmentalizes the muscle into the arms, the torso, and the legs of the lower body. And so we get to see there, the algorithm of the machine looks a little different. And it says, do you have enough to move your body? Because people's structures are different, heights and stuff. And what we've discovered is that you need 10% over the average for wellness to be able to be explosive.
Interesting.
If you don't have 10% muscle over the average, you're going to struggle with the ability to have enough tissue to produce enough power. And so what we find is over 60% of the youth population is overdeveloped in their legs and underdeveloped in their torso and their arms.
Interesting. Okay.
Over 60%. Now, everybody's like, oh, well, if they develop and whatever, you'd see it different as adults. Nope. See the same thing with adults.
Interesting.
Now, let's back this up from an evolutionary perspective for a second.
Let's do it.
I don't think, now I don't have this data, but this is just, what I would think and believe. If I took that same test to farms in the Midwest and to third world countries where people actually have to do manual labor and carry things, I think you would see a difference. I think what we're seeing there is a technologically advanced society that underdevelops kids' torso and upper body. Even in PE, when I was little, we were an hour a day or more of activity. We did PE every day, and we did playground every day. In PE, we're rope climbing, we're hanging on monkey bars. We're doing things, and so that's a whole other topic.
And they're not doing that now, is what you're saying.
No. And so when you come in and this is where the golf industry is driving me bonkers. Everything's about vertical thrust, because we got force plates and we see that the great guys do it. But if you give an athlete who has a weak upper body more vertical thrust, you're going to make their golf swing worse.
Right. Because they can't transfer it.
Right. I totally fell in that arena, maybe 7-ish years ago. And I kept wondering, why are some of my players getting worse? It's because we developed this massive vertical jump, but we didn't put the upper body component with it. And it throws them off.
Yeah, I know. I really want to come back to this because this is some of the stuff that we've gotten nerdy about on some of our calls. So let's get into that.
Yeah, let's finish the going through the screen. So
keep telling us about the screen.
Yeah. So we do the muscle scan, which to me is the foundation. Like, what are you bringing to the table? Then we do our foundational tests. So what we do is we've blended the TPI screen for golfers, the functional movement screen with FMS, and then blended in some other things, because I essentially need to know, can your lead arm, internally rotate, and can it adduct? I need to know if your trail arm can externally rotate. We do that different from TPI. They look at external rotation on the lead arm because of finish, but really all the power expression happens down. And what we found is the external rotation is always going to be limited if I'm very lat dominant on my lead side, which you should be. So we want to see is, can you horizontally adduct so you can actually load this angle? And then can you internally rotate? Because that really is going to affect how well you control the club. So, under load when you start to transition. So we do that on the lead arm, measure the trail arm. We look at all the rib cage, breathing.
And these are table tests.
No, we do it all active standing, because I want to see, can you do it against gravity or your body weight?
Right, which is what the sport requires, right?
Exactly. So and then we started using an easy angle, which is an electric goniometer that's super easy to use. It's awesome. It kind of works 3-dimensionally a little bit. And because instead of putting people in buckets like pass fail, what we realized is we need to track progress. So if somebody's really a bad fail and we do an exercise intervention and then they fail again, in the past we would dump those protocols. Hey, it didn't work. But really what we said is we need to know, did that improve at 10 degrees?
Right.
Because if it did, we know there's something good there, but why didn't it improve more? That's when we started diving into, the stuff that FRC talks about with joint capsule and, getting, you get too rigid and fibrotic joints, and they got that whole tangent. So we measure everything in there with an easy angle for active range of motion. And then we use some SFMA breakouts, to see, is this limited because of just soft tissue, muscle pattern, or is it a joint issue?
Joint, yeah.
And that way we can get in the right arena for, exercise interventions. Then from there, we go to the Proteus machine, where we're going to measure all the stuff that Cressy test does. But for golf, we do it, I look at it a little different, and we break it out a little different. We're actually going to start doing our version of the testing now that you guys have the comparison charts.
Yep. Because
that way I can get quick and easy reporting. And then from there, we go into our TrackMan bay, where we have a full simulator, commercial level simulator set up with TrackMan, with BodyTrack force plates, and with KVest 3D. And then this is all things that, we didn't come up with or invent. TPI has promoted this model. We just started adding technology and things to this model to help us get better at diagnosing the problem.
Yeah, quantifying it and being able to track it. Right.
Yes.
That's really the key. Well, so let's jump in real quick on the Proteus side. What are those movements that you like to test? I know that you're looking at some lateral bounds, you're looking at trunk rotations. What else are you looking at? So the push pull we do, because that shearing component, that when you're pushing one arm, that's really measuring how well you can shear force.
front to back. And then it really tells us a little bit more about how the trunk and oblique system can handle kind of the initial and end phase of the motion. Then we use the D2 flexion extension pattern on the trail arm. Okay. We use D1 on the lead arm because lead arm is not, but here's what I'll tell you. It starts D1. And then once the club gets down toward the bottom, you're actually in D2. And so right when the force transfer happens, kind of when the wrist angle starts to open and you're way down and toward the bottom, it is a little bit of a D2 right there. So the first part of the Proteus D2 movement, when you have to kind of load that initial, like right off your hip. That there is a co-contraction that happens there between D1 and D2 in that position that late in the swing, because the D2 flexion data is very indicative of what the lead shoulder can handle in certain phases of the swing. So I really like a D1 and D2 on the lead shoulder. Oh, here's the other, this is a recent discovery in the last 2 weeks. So we get a lot of players that when they go into their backswing, they like to bend the elbow and they like to reverse spine angle to get the club up.
So go into kind of an extension.
Yeah, they call it reverse spine angle, early extension, or they call it reverse spine angle in golf. And so what happens is a lot of times those people their D1 flexion is so weak that they actually can't get the club up and over across their chest. So they have to substitute.
So they can't get their scapula maybe around.
They can't get their scapula around, but also just the whole anterior shoulder capsule. So where all your pec attachments are, where all the bicep tendons come in, where your subscap rotator cuff, all of that stuff where it attaches. I find a lot of people are really, really bad there.
Yep.
It's really bad.
And I know that you're a PRI guy, or you've done some PRI stuff. You know that that's my background, which, by the way, yes, those who know, is Postural Restoration Institute's what that stands for. But they're big on the rib cage, right? It's a thing that they really look at. And a very common thing is that left-sided rib cage being a little too, elevated, and that and the ribs being more kind of externally rotated and almost think of like overinflated is a way to think about it on the left side. That actually can block a scapula from coming forward around and prevent that. So, especially if the abdominals aren't very good, those left side abdominals, if those are weak, which, by the way, could lead to some of that same kind of reverse
absolutely
extension stuff. So yeah, that's super interesting. So when you find this stuff,
well, let me
go ahead.
One thing. So I love PRI, but I'm not a therapist. I work in, it's too hard to get into all that nuance. So I want to know if I measure a pattern and that pattern's junky, okay, or bad. I want a simple way to know if your D1 flexion is bad. It's super easy to know. I don't have to do all the table breakouts.
Right.
But what we're finding now is if your D1 pattern is bad, it puts you in a poor backswing position, which means now I'm not loaded properly for transition, and therefore I'm not going to optimize my power. So we started realizing D1 flexion is super important to look at in our golfers.
And you're doing this when you say
on Proteus,
you're looking at it on Proteus. You're saying that the numbers are low on Proteus.
And the other thing we simplify, if I use the word chop and lift, it's because nobody understands D2 flexion extension. Even some of my younger coaches are like, no, wait a minute. And they're kind of like having to think through to me. So it's shoulder chop and lift. So I got D1 lift, D1 chop, D2 chop, D2 lift. Simplify the terminology. And all the chop and lift stuff I learned from the Gray Cook school, is really D2, 1 and 2 flexion just bilaterally, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yes, we look at it on Proteus, and actually, to be honest with you, most of what we're doing now is moving away from all of this mobility training, unless you have a bad joint. Okay. If you have a bad joint, it's different, because if we load the tissue properly, it mobilizes it. All of this, like just this constant desire for Stretch Lab and Eldoa and all, just on and on.
Yeah.
I wasted 10 years of training overemphasizing that. Yeah. People can't move because they're weak, but they're not weak in push-pull. They're weak in their other movement patterns. Their shoulder flexion is simply, my extension is weak, my flexion is weak. So when we started putting people on flywheels and training that, we don't have to chase mobility anymore.
This is something I really am excited for you to talk about, which is how those flywheels training. We've talked a lot about this, in our personal conversations, how you'll actually use that to help someone increase their mobility, and how basically you're able to chase a couple of different factors at once: mobility and change of direction, speed, and the ability to have that starting strength, right? All those things that you're able to kind of chase with something like a flywheel. And when you pair that with something like Proteus or some of your other methods, how that's really helping in multiple aspects of their physical limitations, right? Whether it be mobility, strength, or all this stuff. Yeah. So I definitely, in fact, I would love for you to talk more about that. Something you've talked about with me on that before has been around this lead shoulder, right? And, it sounds like, if I'm not mistaken, something you found in general is that one of the biggest weaknesses in someone's golf swing is actually more their lead shoulder, maybe than any other things. You've also mentioned grip strength. Can you talk a little bit about that? Or
so when we take all that Proteus data, we take their 3D data, we take everything, I sit down and I break it down. And it took looking at a lot of data sets before patterns started to emerge. And what I realized is, I don't even know the percentage right now, but it's over 2/3 of golfers do not have good transition of speed. Like their kinematic sequence. So, I load the hips first, they peak, then I go, my torso accelerates, then my shoulders accelerate, then my hands accelerate. So it's like coming up the body. I'm taking that power from the ground, extending it out to the club.
And you're using that with you're assessing that with K-Vest?
K-Vest and body track, so force plate. But we quit using the force plate because it's the 3D will tell you 9 times out of 10. Once I looked at enough data sets, I realized I don't have to get that force plate out, because if I see these types of patterns, we know they're not using the ground. And then everybody starts arguing why. It's this, like, if you can't transfer force across your lead shoulder, your brain is not going to put you in that position.
Right.
And so, and I did a scatter plot on it a while back, and we're going to take all this data and work with you guys, and we're going to put it through multiple regression software and let computers run millions of calculations and prove this thing out. That was the other thing too. I want to prove that your muscle scan, your range of motion testing, and your Proteus profile will predict your 3D. It will predict how you swing the club. I don't care how much instruction you've had. It will predict. So that's one of my main goals, if I lay it on the table.
I got it. It's on the table, man. You heard it here.
So we've on all the correlation, when I look at scatter plots and take these, what we realize is if you can't transfer force proportionately across the lead leg, horizontal rotation, lead arm chop and lift, trail arm chop, and grip strength, and then lead arm pull, you're not going to sequence well at high speeds. Now, if you back yourself down to 70% of your max speed, you can, because ultimately you're backing yourself down to your lowest power denominator.
So the weakest link in the chain.
The weakest link is always going to affect it. I got guys that can go 133 miles an hour with their club, and I can say, okay, there's your peak. Now I want you to give me the fastest next 5 swings in the fairway, and they're only 2 to 3 miles an hour different. But they have the most balanced power profiles. And so, yes, motor learning is really complex, and all this neuroscience on that is complex. But if we just break down the basic thing, the brain, if it has to do something fast, it's only going to use its greatest assets.
Right. And part of that's a protection mechanism, right?
Absolutely.
It's trying not to you're trying not to hurt yourself.
Correct.
So that's really fascinating. So then let's talk about the training side. So you see some of these weaknesses, some of these imbalances. How kind of give us your training philosophy? Kind of what do you target first? And what are the type of interventions you're going to do?
Okay, so this is where Proteus really changed how we dose lifts. Okay, so when we first got it in January of 20. I had the 2 of the high school baseball programs in Texas, 2 of the best. One of them won state they won state the year before, and then they won state the year after COVID. And then the other one went to state. So these are the 2 of the best. They had kids that were drafted off those teams. They had probably 40 of them went to scholarship baseball in college. So like really, really good athletes, guys that threw 95 miles an hour, guys that could hit exit velo 95 plus, like legit players in high school. So I ran them through the original power test. Okay. And they scored in the top 95 percentile in vertical jump. Okay. So man, yeah, we got some guys that can produce, but they were average in the lateral bound. And that really bothered me. I was like, we split squat, we do single leg training. What the heck is going on here? And so what I realized is we weren't training the lateral angle. So this is where this whole concept, and I see it on Instagram, you got this formula for 90 mile an hour and this, and they're all bilateral based lifting. Hey, you got to, and you know, some even the you got a split squat, you know, step back split squat 2 times your body weight. That's only going to work for the guys that are already gifted laterally.
Right.
They genetically can transfer forward. Greg Rose even said this in a recent TPI post. There are people that can do linear lifts and translate it to rotation. And then there are people that can't. So what's happened is we based our whole strength conditioning on these linear barbell lifts because the barbell was invented and power cleaning and all that became popular because sports science runs off on tangents every time something new comes along. And they've based training off of the gifted people. Right. So we've all bench, squat, power clean, you know, step back, split squat, all linear driven lifts, all vertically oriented against gravity. You know, it's pull-ups even as well. And we go, okay, now you should be able to transfer that. Well, what happens for the 2/3 of the population that can't?
Right.
Okay. Right. So that's what I started. I was like, why aren't all of our people getting better from that? And I used to, you know, genetics, and some people aren't fast. Like we actually have taken guys that scored in the bottom 2 percentile of vertical jump for their age and gotten them into the 80th percentile. So this whole concept that you're completely limited, no, they just may need the different stimulus and they may need it a longer period of time to make it happen. Got guys who couldn't make the baseball team their freshman, sophomore year playing Division II baseball.
Awesome. All
because the Proteus allowed us to realize and go, wait a minute, these guys are just really bad in this force angle.
Right.
They can produce power, but no speed. And we'll get into that too on the contraction part. So I forget why I went off on that tangent.
Well, something I add here I think is interesting, which is I think you've probably seen this. Like golfers historically they've been late to the weight training game, right? In general, right. But maybe part of that is because these guys were never good at that, you know, especially a lot of these elite golfers. It's one of those, you know, chicken or the egg things. They were probably already good at their sport without having to do these linear things. And maybe they just weren't receiving the right type of, you know, resistance training that they would be good at. Because people only like training what they're good at. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's a great point is, you know, we too oftentimes, you know, base everything off the anomalies.
Right.
Which then limits development. That was, okay, I'm going to back up on something. When I was at SMU and we'd have camps, football camps, soccer camps, high school kids come in, they do the camp. They would have us in strength conditioning staff. We would go test all the athletes. The coaches only really wanted the names of the top performers because they needed athletes. And so I went, wow, all of these kids aren't going to be considered because they simply aren't explosive enough.
In the gym.
No, well, in lateral bound tests, vertical jump tests, pro agility tests, they're simply not fast enough. Speed is the key to athletics. If you're fast, we can spend time on skill and get better at it.
Right.
And if you're not, and you know, oh no, there's people that aren't coordinated. I can give you case studies of that because nobody spends enough time with them. So, what Proteus really taught me, if we go back to those baseball guys, is they couldn't do the lateral bound at a high level, yet they could split squat significant amount of weight. So what we did is we changed to Cossack squat or lateral goblet squats. And then we took our Kaiser machines, because we got a ton of those, and we wrapped a strap around them and made them jump against a horizontal load. Guess what happened in 4 weeks? They scored in the top 95 percentile in lateral bound.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay. And the ones of those teams, the little group of players that were at the top, all the guys below them moved up. So it's not that we changed the elite guys and made them substantially better. It's that we took the next tier of guys and moved them more to the elite category.
And that's their sports performance moved up as well.
Yeah. So like their exit velo, their 3D testing, things like that.
Awesome.
And so that's when I went, we have to get more angle specific on training.
And that's so much that something you said to me recently, I think you've even gotten away from doing a lot of barbells, period, right? Like you're doing mostly dumbbells.
Here's the thing. If we just take golf, I have almost every one of my high school players goes over 120 miles an hour. Some of them go over 130. So these guys are faster than tour average. They can control the ball. They're shooting below par. They're going off to college and all that kind of stuff. And none of them anymore deadlift.
Oh, wow.
So I know that I will be hammered for this if I posted that on Twitter, which I don't even do Twitter anymore because all it is an argument. They don't, because there's several reasons. One, I found in my data that certain people, when you get to body weight or more, it reduces mobility.
And that's body weight on the deadlift.
Yes. So if I weigh 225 pounds, if I start going past 225, they start regressing. And where they regress in is trunk rotation and neck and shoulders. So let's think about this for a second. If these people have poor breathing mechanics and poor, core stability, and if you look at where the lat inserts, and where its origin, and that, we want to really flex those lats on the deadlift, you're imposing a demand on a breathing system that can't handle it. So what happens is you create more kyphosis, you push worse PRI patterns, all those asymmetries, they get worse. And we get, they already have, this forward head posture from texting, so if somebody's 10 or 20 degrees in forward head posture and you deadlift them, you're going to make them worse. Like 9 times out of 10.
And heavy deads.
Actually, to be honest with you, I'm starting to know, because we started looking at it even more. Because look, we track every set and rep through apps. We track every pre and post screen. So all I have to do is export some data in Excel, throw it in a spreadsheet, and start looking at scatter plots. Okay. And so I would wonder how many places out there actually have that much data and look at it for their players.
Right.
Okay. That's the only reason we're coming to some of these conclusions. It's not because we're smarter than anybody or that we have any, it's just, we simply have the data and we're willing to go, well, what does the data say? And, I was listening to a Cressy podcast with Bill Parsi, brilliant guy. And
Bill Parisi? You talking about Bill Parisi?
Sorry. I don't know how to pronounce some of the names and stuff.
Nah, all good.
So he was talking about, and maybe it wasn't actually him, maybe it was a guy that works with him. Forgive me if I've gotten some of the names wrong, but they were talking about the fascial system and how he didn't like doing compressive barbell loads on the spine because the spine starts becoming fixed in extension. And then you're going to limit flexion and rotation, which we have to flex and rotate. Right. So he looked at some data and then had some I don't call it clinical data or outcomes there at his facility where they were seeing, that happen. And if we take the extremes, NFL linemen, they've been working in extension their whole life and those guys can't rotate and actually start to see bone adaptation.
Right. Yeah.
So why would I take a golfer and want to fix him into extension and give him, load his breathing patterns worse and do all of that just for the sake of it trains the posterior chain. Yeah. It only challenges it vertically in compressive axial loading, but that's not what happens in the swing. The forces are all diagonal and lateral. It does not mimic, but because some guys did it and got faster, that must be it. Those are the anomalies. Right. So I can take those golfers, use cables, use Proteus, use dumbbells and med balls, and develop it with injury resilience, no regression in mobility. And when I started doing that, the second time we'd test them after 12 weeks, it was like, I don't even know why I'm doing these mobility tests anymore. They're all optimal. Right. Oh, nice. It's like our record of your rescreen when you follow that type of training, like we don't have to chase mobility anymore. Wow. And that's why all of those years I spent with 50 and 60% of my program mobility, right, it was because they were weak and we were lifting them wrong. And
what's interesting is you're using the loading to also help them with, I mean, the way that you're loading them, it will naturally increase their range of motion, right?
Exactly.
So if you're loading them in these patterns, these rotational patterns, these, frontal plane patterns, it's going to naturally lead to an increase in mobility in those directions at the same time.
Let's pick two scientific examples. Okay. Mm-hmm. So there's a gentleman, I think his name's pronounced Chris Beardsley.
Oh yeah. Beardsley. Yeah. I love him.
All he does is post study data.
Yep.
So I saved one day that showed if you rapidly challenge a muscle eccentrically. Mm-hmm. So rapid eccentric, that muscle will change its length.
Yep.
Okay. Now, so there's, lab. Now, Cressy, when he talked about Proteus data on his pitchers, mm-hmm. and he did it at the end of the season, maybe it was college or pro, I can't remember, that their non-dominant side trunk rotation was better mm-hmm. than their dominant side trunk rotation.
Yep. Yep.
So let's put those two pieces together.
I was part of that study. So
you were, okay. So let's put those two pieces together.
Yep.
All I do all season is rotate and throw one way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm constantly, if I'm a righty, I'm constantly rapidly loading eccentric one way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see the same thing. If you take that data and I actually measure trunk rotation, I see non-dominant rotation better.
Interesting. So it's that rapid eccentric contraction of the musculature going the opposite direction is actually maybe making that musculature stronger.
Well, no, because they usually test lower.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So here's where you get into, why you have to maintenance. So if post playing season, I have an asymmetrical range of motion away from the side I rotate, and I'm more powerful to my non-dominant side. What that tells me is that the side you're going to, or the way you play, it's too weak. And so what it couldn't do is it couldn't handle the repetitive use of that tissue. So that's where flywheels came into play.
Okay.
So I started going, okay, now I understand, or and understood triphasic training, but the whole emphasis on eccentrics. But when you do a lot of eccentrics, man, it trashes you.
Yeah.
And it's slow. So you have to pair it with something fast. Mm-hmm. And the flywheels change that whole game.
Gotcha. So you're basically you're able to train that whole, V, right? That whole kind of V concept in the triphasic training in a more compact time space, right? And
then we quit doing it at weeks. Like we're not going to isometric or we're not going to eccentric for 3 weeks. And we do it all micro dosing either within the workout or within a week. Because here's the other thing I found. So that same group of baseball players. So we did all their Proteus tests and we started training. And then I got into my little mini cycles during the season. Mm-hmm. And so actually this was the year after COVID. So this was 2021. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. 2021. So during that year, we also bought the VBT sensors push, and we have those all over the gym. And so because we learned, hey, we've got to do the lateral squat fast. We got to do split squat fast. We got to do everything faster. Okay.
Okay.
My guys were like peaking right in February. It was awesome. Season starting. These guys are going out. Like my pitcher's throwing, the fastest they've ever thrown. Then we cycled out of velocity-based training for a couple weeks to, periodize. We can't do this all the time. You got to change things up. Uh-huh. So we went back to some isometrics and eccentrics. We still did med ball work. So we still did some version of velocity. But all of a sudden we went back to our deadlift because we were still deadlifting at that point in time. And we put the sensors back on, and the guys came over and they said, "Hey coach, something's wrong with my sensor." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I was deadlifting 375 at 1.5 meters per second in February, and this is March." And he said, "I can barely get 225 for 0.85. This kid can deadlift 500-pound max. Okay. He actually was I think all Big 12 freshman at Texas Tech this last year, baseball player. And I said, "That's interesting." I said, "Let's switch the sensors." So I thought maybe that one just bad. Nope. Same thing with the other one. Then down at the other end of the rack, 2 other baseball players said, "Hey coach, I'm having the same issue." I went, "What is going on here?" So
they all got slower.
They got slower because of volume and because they weren't tapping the nervous system on a regular basis. Now we know that 72 hours and you start slowing down some. But I want you to think about that. 375-pound deadlift at 1.5 meters a second.
That's fast.
Down to 225 at 0.85. That's a massive loss of speed and power production.
Yeah.
Okay. Another caveat to that is that same athlete, when he came into our gym, he already came in as a good athlete. He was already a great player. He could deadlift, 405 for 5 times or something like that. Okay. But when we started focusing on the velocity, I said, okay, I don't care how much weight you can move. I care how much weight you can move fast. So I said, the goal is one meter a second. You're almost it's almost jumping. Not quite. Their heels are coming off a little bit. Okay. So I said, let's go back and I want you to find the weight that you can move at 1 meter a second. He had to go down to 185 pounds.
Oh, man.
Okay. Now, that didn't follow all the modeling that the strength conditioning world says. Strength conditioning world says if you can do this weight at this speed, you should be able to do this weight at this speed. That's where I realized it's all theory. Okay. Because the body's too complex. So he goes from 185 at a meter a second to 375 at a meter and a half a second in 3 weeks. Okay. Then he drops, but it only took him 2 weeks to come back. And then I said, okay, we are going to do velocity-based work all week. We'll just do some supplemental things and we'll vary the angles and all of that. And we use the Kaisers to measure it rotationally. Those guys in July, so they played from February to July. Okay. One of them went all the way to the state finals game, so they were like mid-June before he finished. Then he went and did some summer ball before college. My best pitcher I had was throwing 96 in February and was still throwing 96 in July. Okay. Which normally all the previous seasons there were drop off.
Right.
My hitter, this kid who was a hitter, he was exit velo of 94 when he started, and he peaked in June at 103. So he actually went up in season.
Right.
And one more data point. Neither one of them had trunk rotation asymmetry. Neither one of them had Proteus trunk rotation power deficiency. They are actually better, their dominant side, even in July. So the question is, what was the difference? The difference was we loaded the pattern all year and we never quit. But we did it with volumes of like 2 sets of 6.
Yeah, that was what I was about to ask. So you decreased the volume, but
massively
you get the stimulus up.
Yeah. Now here's another thing. When that kid came back from college,
interesting.
So he leaves for school, scoring like 98 percentile in all his Proteus moves, both in acceleration and power. When he shows back up in December after being on a college strength conditioning plan at a Division I school with a good team, he came back 22% slower in every pattern.
Man.
And that's not the only one. Happens across the board because college coaches, strength coaches are stuck in football mindset. Everything is volume, everything is barbell, and they're ruining their players.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear this all the time.
And the podcast on that I listened to with Cressy, I bought his book and read it, the fascial training book. Yeah, he gave a case study of Chris Sims going down to Texas and I'm a Longhorn fan. But the training back then, he would go back slower and they'd have to refix him. That's what I have to do with my college guys right now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was doing all of that until Proteus started showing me how poorly the traditional training does for rotational athletes. And I would argue that if I take a skill position in football, a quarterback, a receiver, a DB, a running back, you're going to see the same things. The guys that are gifted can go in the weight room and crush it. Right. But the guys in that next tier, the weight room crushes them. And he talks about that in his book as well, that times and a lot of kids, their 40 and all that drops when their second year in college because everything's about mass and there's a total misunderstanding of what makes people fast. And then they re-get it back when they go to their combine workouts because they don't lift heavy, they work on speed.
Right.
And so the whole strength conditioning world got overly influenced by the barbell and powerlifting and some of this ancillary stuff. And the data now, if everybody was collecting data this way or even greater, you would change everything in there.
Well, and the thing is what you're talking about it's really interesting because something I actually met Bill Parisi a few weeks ago. He's came and saw Proteus in person for the first time. And
now I'd love to pick his brain.
oh man, he's a really smart guy. But something he said, he immediately used it and he understood it, and he had his own term for it. He was like, why this is really good is because for fascia is because it does multi-dimensional submaximal loading.
Yes,
which is all what we have to do to build up fascial lines and build up fascia to be able to transfer forces in the planes and directions of movements that we want.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the fastest anyone, I'd ever seen anyone jump on the machine and go, oh yeah, I know why this is good. And that just makes sense too with how you're talking about how you're training your athletes, right? You're maintaining that multi-dimensional submaximal loading.
You want another case study?
Their season, right?
You want another case study?
What's that?
So took an LPGA player, a young one early on the scene, and she needed more club head speed. Okay, she played elite college golf, won titles in conference, all that kind of stuff. I put her on a 1x20 plan, which I forget there's a doctor that wrote a book called the 1x20 plan. I read it. It was a good read.
So you mean 1x20, like
one set up to 20 reps, no more than 20 reps of like 20 movement patterns.
Okay.
So all of your kinesial stuff, flexion, extension, rotation, abduction, adduction. I put her on that. And in 4 weeks, she jumped 6 miles an hour on club head speed. Now I did it because she didn't like lifting. She was kind of a frail frame. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to crush her in the gym. Mm-hmm. So what did I do after the phase one? I said, this worked like a charm. Let's add a second set. Let's go up and weight. And guess what? She got slower. Oh,
interesting.
And I went, oh no, what does that mean? So I put her back on the 1x20. We regained it. And she's gone so much of the year. I don't get to work. That was all kind of during COVID when she had time to train. Now she's back on tour. We don't get to do all that stuff anymore. But it was amazing to me that a 1x20 plan worked for her. Now I'll take you myself. So I'm 43. I did the 1x20 plan first myself years ago. And I think I jumped 4 to 5 miles an hour that off season. That's all I did in the winter. I just go in, every movement pattern I can think of, one set.
Love it. So you're just giving your body all those different doses of those different directions.
Submaximal, multi-dimensional.
Yep.
I've never heard that term. It's awesome.
No, I loved it. When he said it, I was like, that's gold right there.
That is gold.
So one more thing here, because I want to go back, all this stuff is awesome, Jarrett. I really appreciate you going into all this detail. Can we go back to the flywheel real quick? Yeah. And I just want to kind of, for people that don't know kind of the triphasic concept, can you maybe describe how using that flywheel trains that change of direction and how you're using that?
Yes.
And maybe let's talk about it in the context of maybe for that lead shoulder and the type of exercise you're doing, or trunk, or whatever you think.
Okay. So when we move a weight, let's take a dumbbell, and I'm laying on a bench, I do a dumbbell press. Mm-hmm. When I first get the dumbbell going, I have to beat the inertia of the weight against gravity. Mm-hmm. And then once I get past that, the weight actually gets easier.
Yep.
So once I break the point of moving the weight against gravity, it gets easier.
Yep.
That happens with all gravity-based weights, barbells, dumbbells, everything. Now with certain cables, so like a 4-to-1 ratio cable pulley, meaning there's a whole bunch of pulleys in there, you don't pass inertia as quick. And with a Kaiser machine, you don't pass inertia. Like it's you still pass it a little bit, but it's longer. It takes you longer to get there.
Right.
With a flywheel, because the load is not a stack based against gravity or kind of set thing, as the flywheel spins, as I'm pushing, so it's spinning, letting the cable out. So I'm moving this disc. I'm creating spin. It's weighted, so it's always wanting to slow down. So the flywheel, as I'm pushing it, if I stop, it'll slow down. Mm-hmm. So for me to drive it and keep tension on the cord all the way through the lift, I have to make the wheel spin, which means I never pass inertia.
I see. Yep.
So it's hard all the way through the range of motion. Then the magic happens. When you get to the end and the cord you hit the end of the cable, there's no more. The flywheel reverses field, and now I have to rapidly decelerate the movement somewhere between 120 and 150% of what I put into it. So what do people do on eccentric training? They try to lift more than they can, on the way down, but that's dangerous. So what do they do in weights? They go, oh, let's just go slow, because that'll increase the tension. But slow also makes me slow in my ability to change.
Yeah, strength is speed dependent, even with eccentrics.
Yes. So and Ben Shear, I love it. He jumped on that and said right away, and he's been doing flywheels a lot longer than I have. He said, I don't find a better tool for training power than the flywheel, because it's rapid eccentric acceleration. So now we get to challenge what we saw from our two studies. Okay, that Cressy saw about the muscle lengthening during the season because it's having a rapid. Now I can actually train that in the gym, and that's why those players didn't have it, and they were better in July than they were in February, because we flywheeled all season.
So keep going though with that rest of that explanation. So now you have to rapidly decelerate,
and then change direction and go back out again.
Right. So the muscle is actually lengthening as it's contracting.
Under load. Yes.
Right. And then it has to reverse direction. So you think of it the way the listeners can think about it, if they're not seeing a visual of us, doing all this stuff with our hands, is you're taking that rubber band.
Yes. Here's my rubber band. Stretching the rubber band, and then I got to go back again.
And then you're going back the other direction.
Yeah, which will change the mobility.
Right. Which over time will actually add, what happens is the muscle will actually gain length.
Correct.
From that action, because it stimulates that, stretch while under contraction. So there's been a lot of studies. I think I've seen stuff from Chris Beardsley as well with his, journal that he puts out with, where he summarizes everything. But a lot of that has to do with then the body will actually add sarcomeres in series rather than in parallel. So you actually can help to lengthen the muscle. And I think that's been shown more in animal models than in human models, but there's definitely a theory that happens.
So let's pick on two things with that. So if we talk about mobility, and I'm going to simplify this again, it's like if I don't have range of motion, it's because my soft tissue doesn't have it, or my nervous system is organizing it in a way and it's limiting the lengthening of the tissue as a protection mechanism. So neurological tightness, or my joint's bad and I just can't move.
Right.
So this one takes time.
That's joint
dangerous,
bad. Joint bad.
Yeah, joint bad takes time. Then you're talking about weeks and months to change that. Okay. The soft tissue version, we can change in a couple weeks, start making changes, maybe even in a session. The nervous system is that tweener. So the nervous system a lot of times creates that neurological tightness as a protection mechanism, because it knows if that muscle gets long, it's going to tear.
Right.
So if I use a flywheel, let's say that I'm limited in shoulder flexion. Okay. So if I get set up where the cable's behind me and I can really challenge my end range and I hit the end of the range, boom, it zaps me back fast. I got to stabilize. I can change. I measured this one day. I have really bad flexion. I have bad joints. I got bad spine, bad breathing. It's all bad. And
football.
It's football. And all I do is spend my time training, so I don't train myself enough, which most strength coaches, you guys know that.
Yeah.
So what I did though is I said, okay, how quickly can I change? I got 15 degrees change range of motion after one set, 22 degrees after two sets, and it kept for 3 days before I had to touch it again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So now here's the one caveat with flywheels. If you hammer out all out effort, you can't do them every other day.
Yeah, well, you're still doing eccentrics, right?
Right. So what we found is newbies, we have to mix it in as one set, and we usually go load perpendicular to muscle. So like I'm going to load it with flexion extension. I'm going to load it abduction, adduction. I'll throw in a push pull in there. But we now, because of Proteus, because of understanding the fact, here's the other one, golfers, great on push pull, horizontal chop and lift, but gives different force angles. And when we play golf, our humerus is not tucked in like this. He's out and he has to move like this.
Right. So
push pull does not always translate to good chop and lift patterns. We found that guys were crushing the pull and were horrible in chop and lift. So we said, okay, we're going to dose it a 2-to-1 ratio. We're going to chop and lift and do all of the bodybuilding moves single arm fly, single arm reverse fly, but we're going to load it at end range, not mid range, where most people in machines like to lift mid range. We're going to load it at end range, and we're going to create 3 progressions. We're going to load it at end range, mid range, and short range, because the MAT community is really on about short end range isometrics from the standpoint of improving neurological function of the tissue, all that kind of stuff. They're right. And so are the guys that are right about loading eccentrically. So what we do is we microcycle it every other week. 1 week it's long range, 1 week it's mid range, 1 week it's short range.
I love it, man. So
within a 3-week period of time, we're going to hit all angles, all velocities, and we're going to load the loading scheme appropriate to the athlete, their level of training. We're not going to throw a 3-setter on somebody who hasn't been lifting for 4 years, because that's where we notice the change in mobility. And so as we put all these components together, we realize there are 5 or 6 foundational templates we use, and then we kind of blend it off of that.
I love it, man. And then you're doing so you're hitting all those different, loads with flywheels and all that. And then
how do you contrast?
What'd you say?
So we contrast it almost all the time.
Got it.
We'll use a flywheel, and then we'll use a speed component, Medball, Proteus, or Kaiser machine, or even like landmines, because you can really explode with a landmine and be safe and not like run out of joint motion. We don't like doing it with dumbbells. We like using bands. So like we found the 3D strap company, What's That Strap? So we like using their handle, their strap to wrap around the body, and their bands, because they come with 3 levels and all the door attachments, as an easy way to do speed anywhere. Because we can trunk rotate it, we can do all the shoulder moves, we can load it horizontally and work on the leg. And what we find is you can actually, step forward, step back for like a linear. Because in golf, you've got the lateral angle and the front angle on the lead leg. So in 9 moves in 20 minutes, I can speed train the body with a set of bands.
And so you're able to hit like most these, like all the main angles.
Yeah. So all we do with the band is we go, okay, I want you to take the heavy band and load the end range. So if I'm taking like lead arm, abduction. So I'm going to take the band, I'm going to work here, because, you guys have the Proteus changes the angle all the way through. A band, you have to reposition about every 20 degrees to hit that. So what we'll do is we'll go long range, we call it. The connections behind me, I'm loaded to where this tissue is all the way lengthened, and I'm just going to work the first phase, hold, back down, heavy, like I can barely move it. Then I'm going to take the light band and I'm going to go full range. I'm just boom, boom, boom.
Right.
The other thing that bands are great for most consumers, because they are harder when the muscle's shorter and they're easier when the muscle's longer. So we have a safety component that's kind of naturally built in. Right. And that's the easy way to do it. And like we throw that in an app and say, go hit it on the road.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, hey, until there's a Proteus in every gym, I think that's going to be a great solution.
Right.
So,
and that was the other.
Talk about how you're doing it with Proteus, though. How are you mixing?
Yes. So the best way to improve speed output, what we found, is a 3-way contrast. We go Flywheel, Proteus, and a Kaiser. The Kaiser functional trainer. Here's why. Kaiser will give us a watt output. Proteus will give us watt output, but it's hard to do the Kaiser heavy. So right now we're playing with and we call that super contrast. So if I'm doing 3 things, that's a super contrast. If I'm doing 2 things, it's a simple contrast, heavy light. So here we're adding in that strength speed. Okay. So what I'll do is we'll go Flywheel, fairly heavy, 6 reps. Then we'll go Proteus, moderately heavy, relative to the person, and we'll work 8 reps. And then we'll go Kaiser light, 10 reps, 6, 8, 10.
Got it. And with the Kaiser, are you doing that same thing where you change the angle?
So we just use mid-range. So like we have it to where like it's not totally behind. It's kind of that mid-range where you're going to feel it more in the mid part of the motion, because Proteus right before it will have hit the whole thing.
Interesting. I love it,
now,
man. Dude, what a cool concept.
But then in a simple contrast, we're going to just go Flywheel Proteus, and we're just going to do Proteus lighter.
Okay. So then you'll go Flywheel, then you'll go heavy Proteus, or moderate Proteus, and then you'll go light Proteus.
Yes. Now here's I don't know if we're running out of time, but I got more info for you.
Yeah. Give me some more, man. We'll run long on this one.
Okay. So if I am not a well-seasoned coach in all of this stuff, which I mean, I've been doing this 18 years. I look at a lot of data and this is like what I love. Mm-hmm. I don't have to figure all this out. Take your Proteus test, whatever they're bad at, make them do it. Make them do it heavy, make them do it light, every workout. The things they're moderate at, touch it once a week. The things they're really good at, touch it once or twice, or once every other week. And on the stuff they're really bad at, don't over volume it. 1 to 2 sets every workout. We call them finishers. You finish after your whole workout, 45 minutes, an hour, you go over and you grab the Flywheel and the Proteus and you touch that pattern again.
I love it, man. There's your soundbite right there. For all the young coaches listening, that's what, if you want to hear anything, that's it right there. That's your recipe for at least a simple thing. So I know you've talked to me before about, if you had to set up kind of like a golf performance center that had minimal space, you could hit a Proteus and some Flywheels, or even one of those Anchor trainers, right? If you had
So there's you're going to spend on a Kaiser $7,000. We have 12 of them. And so, but we, that was at that point in time. So now I could take one rack, okay, with 4 posts mounted to the floor. Okay. I'm not even going to use the rack for weights. I'm going to put a Flywheel on each corner. And then I'm going to put a Proteus, like maybe 1 Proteus per 2 athletes.
Oh, okay.
3 athletes, 1 Proteus for 3 athletes would work. 4 starts getting to be a push. And then I'm going to put an Anchor trainer on the rack as well. And for golf, that's all I need.
Yeah.
I don't have to do dumbbell moves. I don't have to do barbell moves. I just have to load the angles that they challenge. So lead leg forward, lead leg lateral, trunk rotation, shoulder chop, both directions. And then you do need row on the lead side. One study we didn't get to, there was a study done on the grip strength, on how much shearing grip is required to maintain the club down at the bottom. 100 miles an hour requires 42 kilos of grip strength. It's a reaction. And so the pull mechanism, the row on the lead side is important.
Got it. Yep. That makes sense to me. If we're looking at a golfer doing a golf swing, let's talk about that lead leg and how much pressure, ground reaction force, all that. How does that come into play? What are you doing to train it? How are you analyzing it?
Okay. This is where the industry, again, is run off on a tangent. So if we take all of our long drivers and best guys, they create anywhere from, 2 times body weight to 4 times body weight equivalent pressure on the lead leg.
Okay.
And the average people out there interpret that as, I need to create that pressure, and that'll help me hit the ball farther. Coaches are trying to have people do. I see Instagram videos, people standing on the little pads like, hey, you got to push, you got to do all that, because they're acting like it's the initiator when actually it's the reaction. It's the equal and opposite reaction to something else. So we use a video of Tiger Woods that I found, a slow-mo version that expresses it perfectly. As I get onto my left side as a right-handed golfer and then start to drive, I'm actually moving energy towards my lead leg. And then my lead leg creates pressure in the ground to send that energy back up. And that's where we're using the ground.
Right.
But if I don't load that mechanism with that getting to the left side and having that downward force, I'm not going to send that up.
Right.
Too often times everybody's trying to work on this push, and they actually create all this back tilt and all this weird throwing of the club, and they mess people up because it's the opposite reaction to a downward chop. And here's an example. Baseball, because the ball is horizontal, they don't have that same swing
pressure
type. Okay. That's why hitters often aren't good golfers, because they hit big slices, where pitchers are different. And that's because pitchers, the way the angle happens coming off the mound is similar to golf. It has a vertical component. So if in baseball argues this to this day, launch angle, you can't tell a guy to hit a high launch angle. And I discovered this in listening to some baseball guys, and also in our own deal, is if you tell a hitter to hit a 20% launch angle, he's going to dip, get out of position, and hit the ball high, pop it up, and he's going to strike out a lot. Okay. That's where the old school is correct.
Mm-hmm.
When you tell a hitter to swing down on the ball, they actually will hit a launch angle because it's the chop that causes the launch angle. It's the downward action.
Does that reaction?
Yeah. So I had a MLB guy's home run hitter, hit 30 homers last year or the year before, whatever. And he loves golf in the off season. He's in here training. He wants to go bring his clubs onto our TrackMan simulator. He's hitting these big, like banana slices. Okay. Guy has all the mobility and everything in the world. He does not need instruction. He just needs an orientation. So I said, hey, I want you to hit that ball, that golf ball, like it's a low outside pitch and you're trying to hit it at second base. The dude hit one from hitting 50-yard slices to 10-yard draws, 50 yards further in that one thing.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
It's because his brain was orienting baseball.
Right.
But the golf ball's down. So the harder he chopped trying to go to second base, the bigger the drive was, and his launch angle or his attack angle of the club, which measures the degree in which the club's coming in. So this would be, if here's the ball, downward attack angle, positive attack angle. Because of all the force data and the way they're telling people is they're getting all these people to feel like they have to swing up on the club, which will actually cause them to flip or slice and create horrible display. And they back tilt and do hang back. The upward stroke happens because I've moved so hard down that when my lead leg creates the downward pressure, sends it back up, the club kicks and causes the upward angle. So that's why baseball old school will say, you got to tell the guy to swing down on the ball. He swings down on the ball. He's not going to necessarily hit a grounder. That's just where he times it up. But if he swings down at a pitch, he's going to create launch angle. So I've been just anecdotally, every time I see a golfer, say, hey, I want you to hit a grounder to second base or at the pitcher, where their orientation. 9 times out of 10, it cleans it up if they have the physical prerequisites. Dude. So this whole thing about vertical thrust is it's a reaction. It's the equal and opposite reaction to the chop. Because the golf ball's down and my club's up. So it has a vertical component. And so I quit telling people also, I can't do that if I have a weak lead shoulder. I can't do that if I have a weak lead oblique. I can't do that if my lateral bounce sucks. My leg can't contract fast enough.
Right.
So anyways, that's where my frustration gets with all this stuff.
So you're training all that though with doing those chop patterns, with looking at lateral bound, doing lateral bounds. And
so I took a couple people that were really bad on their lead shoulder and their body track 3D or their force plate data, and they couldn't get on their lead side. And when I got them to do the chop, they hoselled the shot. They literally couldn't control the club. So I said, well, let's build the shoulder up and come back. And we did a few weeks later, we come back, bam, like magic. You give them a lead shoulder, now they can chop. So that to me, the lead lat, the obliques and the anterior pelvis, the lower pelvis, that's the key for all swinging sports. If you don't have that area, this, just right here, it won't work. You can have the greatest vertical jump, the greatest glutes ever, but if that's your force transfer, if that force transfer sucks, you cannot swing fast.
I love it, man. Wow. Well, Jarrett, this has been an awesome, just dump of information.
That was a really fast 2 hours.
We didn't even need the full 2 hours because you were just crushing it. So, well, here, let's do this. So something we've been doing with everyone is jumping into some kind of rapid fire questions we call the Proteus power questions. Okay. So I just want you to give me your quickest answers, whatever comes to mind. Okay. You ready? All right, let's go. So first up, what is the biggest gimmick you've seen in the last few years in the training world? All the stupid stuff on the Bosu ball where I'm trying to combine like 8 lifts into one. I'm standing on a Bosu ball with my rear foot elevated and I'm doing a dumbbell down and out and up or with a band. Like I hate that. A great answer. Yeah. Bosu ball, unfortunately, not super transferable for sport.
Well, and also like 5 lifts into one move. It's functional.
Right. The F word. It's an F word.
Yes.
All right. What piece of equipment do you wish you had that you don't have?
One of the force plates that golf pros use where you can measure all the different angles. So it's like it's on each foot. And it tells you direction of force. Like the body track's a little like more global.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, you sent us some pretty cool stuff before where you looked at Proteus data, looking at and how it changes, force.
Oh yeah, that's on our Instagram. I made that post a while back. It actually shows when I did the Proteus golf swing, it increased my lead leg pressure.
Which is what you want. Can you give me just your top 5 exercises, Proteus or not, and why?
Yeah, lat pull down, trunk rotation,
2,
lateral squat, and split squat.
That's 4.
And then trail shoulder chop.
I love it, man. I love it. And what are you using that with? With you using those with Proteus, with
Flywheel, cable, or Proteus, or you have to get in really weird dumbbell positions to do that, or landmine.
Oh yeah, there you go. Awesome. All right, this one. Who is your favorite athlete of all time and why?
Well, the first thing that popped in my mind was Emmitt Smith.
Oh, love it.
I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan.
Yeah.
He had a massively long career.
Yep.
And the other thing I remember most about him is everybody said he was too slow. But at his combine test, when they actually measured his acceleration, he got to his top speed extremely fast.
Interesting.
So it neutralized the whole top speed component because he could get there quickly. And then you saw that in his ability to play.
Right. He could get away from people in early steps. And
but I have to throw a second one. I think the greatest running back of all time was Barry Sanders.
Oh, dude, love Barry Sanders.
There's no comparison.
Guy's unbelievable. Just a human joystick. All right.
Which, by the way, we have to pause again.
Well, let's go.
We didn't talk about why the acceleration on the Proteus test is just as or more important than the power.
Let's just go into it, man.
Okay.
Let's just go into it now. Why, Jarrett, why is acceleration important on the Proteus test?
So we've talked about all of this whole muscle contraction at its long state. Okay. So when I'm right at that transition point in a swing, that's where I have to create the speed. So my trunk rotation, if I do a Proteus trunk rotation, I hit 400 watts or something ridiculous, but my acceleration was under 10 meters a second. That really means that it took me all the way to here
to get there
before I could start creating speed. But in a golf swing, I have to create that speed instantaneously right at that motion for that particular part of the pattern. So the first phase of the Proteus trunk rotation is the most predictive. Remember I said correlative and predictive? So acceleration, I think Chrissy found this too. Acceleration was the biggest predictor of velo for pitchers.
Yep, for sure.
Acceleration is the biggest predictor of club head speed. Not correlator, predictor.
Predictor. Awesome.
If you can't, because what the acceleration is telling us, when the muscle's at its longest state, can it produce speed right away? Or are you having to reposition yourself to get the muscle to a shorter state so that it can produce speed? Because if we think about that arc, that power happens in that middle third of range of motion.
Right.
Okay. Well, if I can train using Proteus and using flywheels more in that early phase, then I give the body the ability to do it early on. And that's the single most important thing.
I love it, man. And that's why this also that your kind of 3 different phases, or those 3 contrasts that you're doing, right, are going to hit all those, right?
Yes. The phase 1, the long phase, you have to have. It's most important.
Yeah. Because you have to have that starting ability.
Yes.
Which is really what drives a lot of the acceleration first, right? Is the ability to basically get out of the hole quickly.
Yes, get out of the hole quickly. Perfect. Yes.
Yeah. So love it. Awesome, man. No, I love all these jumping in on tangents and everything. So, all right. Hey, next one. Give advice to a young Jarrett Phillips starting his career. What would you give advice? What would you say to young Jarrett Phillips?
Oh my goodness. Well, how old are we talking?
Hey, I'm thinking starting out in his career.
Do not go out on Friday and Saturday nights. Buy more books.
It took you too long to get to that point, huh? Because you sounded like you got the learning bug, and once you got it, man, you just
but too much time. My 20s, man, I would be 7 years ahead of where I am now if I would have not worried about partying.
Oh man, hey, I think that's a lot of people's 20s. All right, what are your favorite podcasts?
Well, my favorite ones are entertainment.
Okay.
And that's the Longhorn Blitz.
Okay. So that's
which is a deep dive into data and football for Texas Longhorns.
Oh, wow.
Like they get into pro football focused data and understanding why way below the surface. But from a standpoint of general information, I'd say Joe Rogan.
Yeah, that's
and then when you're talking about training, I mean, I love Cressy's because he just gets such a wide variety of guys in all phases, coaches, strength researchers. I mean, so I would say from an education standpoint, Cressy.
I love it. Well, we hope to have him on real soon. So
excellent.
Yeah. So, well, hey, Jarrett, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. You went beyond my expectation. You hit all the awesome information. I know we could go another 2 hours if we really wanted to. We could dive into each component for each, of things that you talked about for an hour plus each. So thanks so much for your time. Where can people find you? How do people find out about you? And if they want to work with you, where do they find you?
TrainPMT.com. That's TrainPMT.com. We are considering a rebranding. If we do, that website will still point to our rebranding. And for all the young guys out there, if you're not far enough along to feel confident in doing all this, like I am doing program design and stuff, we are kind of licensing our programming through our app to other facilities.
Got it. So you're doing some kind of long distance training people from far. Is that what you mean?
But even that, a trainer could simply send us the Proteus data. We'll design the plan based upon the equipment, give the trainer access to the plan, and he implements the plan.
That's awesome. So that's so cool. So you can actually take the data from someone from a different location, right? You can have them, you'll analyze it, design a program, send it to them, and then they'll retest at that facility.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing a lot of business that way?
We've licensed 2 country clubs, which each have about 5 trainers that all use our programming. And then we've got a couple of trainers remotely that do it. I've been dabbling because I wanted to make it work well, but we're about to do it to high schools in Texas where the coaches that run our programming, because what I discovered is programming is the most important thing. If you're not training the right angles in the right way, you won't get results. And I've had these distance people just take our programming and do it and get almost as good results as we get here.
I love it. And actually, I would be remiss if I didn't kind of bring this up before we sign off here. So can you talk a little bit about how your business changed when you got Proteus? Did you start seeing any change in the amount of business that you got, or,
So I could tell you this. We used to do a lot of social media marketing around swing speed, bat speed, swing speed, all that. We turned that off in late 2020 because we could not follow up with them fast enough because of the amount of onboarding and screening we were doing. And we charge $179 for the screen. So you don't get to come in and test for free. Nobody balks at it. And nobody balks at rescreen prices. We charge half the rate for a rescreen because it takes half the time. And nobody tests people. And if you're bad at making the test better, that means that your repertoire is bad. You need to further your education. You need to get better training. That was the first thing early on. When I started screening people, I realized how bad I was at actually changing things that matter.
Right.
And that's what sent me on all of that education stuff. So Proteus, we haven't had to run marketing. I'm going to turn it on back now just because I want to grow more. But we've been referral based since late 2020 and haven't had to. And we got Proteus in January. And so I would say it had a big impact on how quickly we get results, which therefore people go, man, he's playing way different. Oh, we've been going to this place. They got this crazy arm machine looking thing.
Gotcha. And last time I heard, you were booked up pretty solid. People had a little wait list.
Yeah, we did. That slowed down a little bit, I think, just because of the time of the year. But we're taking the Proteus this weekend. It'll be the first mobile Proteus going to the North Texas High School Golf Coaches Association. I think there's 80 to 100 schools there. We're going to show it to the coaches. We're going to start getting it to where we can take it to the high schools and be able to tell them, hey, you don't have a big enough engine. You need to spend time and energy building a bigger engine.
And don't build it the way you used to build things.
Right.
Build it this way.
Yeah. No more squats at school.
I love it, man. I love it. All right. Well, hey, Jarrett, thanks a lot, and good luck with everything. And thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks you. This was a pleasure.